All right, everybody. Well, I am here with Doug from Cycle Brewing. He is the owner and everything else here. So I'm just going to kind of start from the beginning, Doug. And we've had your beer. We know what Cycle's about.
Good.
But I want to start from the beginning and how you got into the beer business.
Probably, my first job was at Oscar Blues. We'd been selling craft beer before it was cool, going back to like 04, 05. The selection in Florida was pretty slim. There were a lot of rules that made it difficult here, but Oscar Blues came into the market in 06, 07 here, so I'd had their beer, and it was in cans. They were the only ones in cans at the time.
Gotcha.
Thought that was awesome, and then went on a little brewery tour in Colorado. Went to Boulder Beer, which we were selling Boulder Beer at the time. Went to Oscar Blues, the new facility in Longmont, as well as the original in Lyons, which obviously none of that's new anymore. But the Longmont facility was pretty raw, and there was a guy who was... We got the tour from, I don't know what her title was, and there was another guy there. Dale was there.
Nice.
Said hello to him, and there was this other guy, Jeremy, and talked with him. They were just setting up the new canning line, and I asked, like, how does somebody get into this? How does somebody get a job here? He's like, pretty much just have to be here. I was like, okay. And I was over the summer, and like in September, I just packed up my stuff and drove out to Longmont, Colorado, and
wow.
I got his number then, and I made his email. I don't remember, but I called him up on a Sunday afternoon. I said, sure, I'm here.
Gee, there you
got any jobs? And he's like, come by Tuesday morning at 9. And then I went to like the roommate wanted ads to find a place to stay that night. I'm like, well, if they need a roommate, it's availability now. So it's better than like a hotel or whatever.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah, found a roommate downtown, and I only had what was in my car, so it wasn't like I had a lot of stuff.
Right.
And started working at Oscar Blues, and that was fall of 08. Didn't stay there that long, but that was that was my intro.
That's a heck of a story there. Jeez. So in Colorado, did you try out any other cities in Colorado? Like, what is the mecca of Colorado? Have you kind of been around, or you just worked at Oscar Blues?
I just worked at Oscar Blues.
Gotcha.
Lived in Longmont. My girlfriend at the time she moved while I was there. Kind of unrelated, but simultaneously to Laramie, Wyoming.
Okay.
Which is like 2.5-hour drive.
Gotcha.
But it was, some of it's pretty, some of it is not. But just, honestly, I just worked, and I didn't make very much money.
And what were you doing there? Were you brewing there?
Just worked on the canning line.
Okay, cool.
Just packaging. I learned how to wash kegs. I learned a little bit of cellar work, like taking care of the brights.
Yeah.
And then just worked on the canning line.
Gotcha. And what brought you to Florida? Was that your next move? Was Florida?
I moved from here.
Oh, you moved from here out there and back. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And then how did you find Cycle Brewing?
Cycle Brewing started as initially, before it was called Cycle Brewing, it was Peg's Cantina and Brew Pub. Before that, it was Peg's Cantina, which is a restaurant that we served those craft beers at in 2004. Nice. So that was 20 years ago. Started the restaurant, and then some rules were changed that allowed you to become a brew pub.
Okay.
As a restaurant, pretty easily.
So you're brewing your own stuff while serving food.
We were giving it away. So when I moved back, like December of 2008, I was brewing in the kitchen and just giving it away.
Okay.
And then you could get we knew so little, but the license for the state, if you had a beer and wine license and served food, was like 3 pages to become a brew pub.
Yeah.
So sure. So we did that and asked, like, do we need to do anything else? And they're like, nope. Wow. Okay. Cool. That was wrong. So we didn't know that. So then we started serving it, and so that was March 1st of 2009. And like the day before was batch 2 at Cigar City, which I went and volunteered there.
Nice.
And brewed with. Wayne was there. Ben Romano was doing a lot of the actual work, mashing in and stuff. Just hanging out. It was very casual back then. Mm. And then, so then I was selling my beer at Peg's. And we kept that going and found out a year later that we did need a federal permit and all those things. And we didn't really have any of that done. But they were pretty nice about it. I mean, we think we made like 72 gallons or something in the first year. It was so small.
Yeah.
But it was fine. and then got it sorted out, got through all the licensing, learned a ton, and so then we're really rolling, and we started doing barrel aged beer there. So like Rare Doss was originally Peg's Cantina and Brewpub beer.
Oh, okay. It just stayed on.
But yeah, that's always mine. I was the only one making it, so it was always my beer. So we just yeah, and then because Peg's Cantina and Brewpub is not a brand, it was just a place.
Right.
And Peg is my mom. That's like a family
cool.
place.
Okay, yeah.
So it was really, that was about the place and the people. So we decided to make Cycle Brewing as a brand for distribution.
Sure.
So we've gotten grown a little bit and had some little 7-barrel tanks, the ones that are back there. Enough to, too much to serve it all on site fresh, but enough to, too little to have a real distributor do it. So we kind of worked the system to have, I didn't own anything, but I did everything.
Gotcha. Okay, great. So kind of backing up a little bit, where did you learn brewing? Like the actual, if you didn't learn it at Oscar Blues, where did you actually learn brewing? Was it kind of self-taught? Did you learn it from somebody else?
A lot self-taught. There was the guy that taught me the first time was, I don't know his name. I don't remember. I barely remember what he looks like. I think his name's in the book because he gave me a copy of, like a beat-up copy of, what is it, the New Joy of Homebrewing, Charlie Vespasian's book.
Cool.
Which I read that, and then it's very easy if you have the ability to get rid of homebrew to brew a lot.
Okay.
And so we had 5-gallon batches. I mean, we probably did 1,000 in the first. So from March 1st to the next March 1st was probably 1,000 batches.
Jeez.
And so you learn a lot.
Definitely.
There were some things that went wrong. I mean, I was in buckets and chest freezers for temp control. It was not great. It was not the worst, though.
Yeah, right.
I had some decent beers, enough to keep, probably had 3 or 4 taps going, but at 5 gallons, that keg's gone. Next one. I mean,
you're definitely getting through
over
beer, right?
600 batches were probably IPA.
Okay.
Trying to figure out good ways to make IPA, and I didn't really get that. I learned some of that. I learned a lot from Wayne and brewing at Cigar City. I'd say that was my first real taking the next step.
Definitely.
But then after that, it was through collabs and contacts working at Cigar City, and then working we got Peg's Cantina actually got recognized for Rare Doss, and we got an invitation to the McKellar Fest, the second one, which was, I don't know what year.
And where's that located?
It's in Copenhagen.
Okay, cool.
This was a great fest, but it was you had to get invited.
Oh, gotcha.
And so it was people that Mickle knew, or beers that were hyped up basically on Rate Beer and Beer Advocate back then.
Nice, okay.
And Rare Doss had made the charts, and so we got invited, and then going there and talking with people.
Definitely.
Making a lot of connections that way. And then having some credibility, as a commercial brewer working at Cigar City helped. So making a lot of connections, and then talking with people. And then there's, I'd say the biggest things, I learned from Wayne. I knew that you could add stuff. I started, my first enthusiastic alcohol venture was in wine, which is picking out all the things from the grapes and the terroir and the barrels.
Of course.
But it's just grapes. You can't add stuff to it. And I knew in beer you can add stuff.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I didn't really put together the possibilities until having Cigar City stuff and just watching Wayne. And then it was immediate was, okay, what do you want to put in there? It's
cool.
Walk over to Whole Foods, which was around the corner, and just start picking out stuff. Because it was Wayne was, probably still is, very, he wants to use raw, actual ingredients.
Okay.
No flavorings. But sometimes that's awesome. You get to, it's easy to narrow down what we were going to put in beer. Because he was very sensitive about stuff that had additives or sugar, all these things that you're not allowed to use. And so it's real raw ingredients,
which is fantastic, yeah.
But then when you go to make certain things I forgot, some candy, he wanted to do something some candy-inspired beer, and he was trying to go back to the beginning of, I think it was caramel or something. It was something that was just this is never going to work.
Yeah.
You're not... it's like candy cherry and real cherry.
Yeah.
There's a wide gulf between those two.
Big time.
So I was more open to, like, I wanted it to, like, if I'm going after a specific flavor, like, I'll use real ingredients every single time over flavors, but I'm not afraid
to use the flavors.
Like, okay. Or honestly, what I found more often works is mixing, because a lot of actual ingredients don't have enough aroma. Like maple syrup, as maple syrup, doesn't have much smell in beer.
And what do you get the maple syrup smell from in beer?
Maple flavoring.
Okay, gotcha.
That's that. If you use, it won't taste like maple,
right?
But you need that aroma to know it's there, and it's fine if beer had stayed like wine, where it was all about, I get the hints of maple, and you can relay the maple this and that, but that doesn't do well in craft beer. You need to be smacked in the face,
big time.
Like if you don't smell the maple on a beer that says it's maple right off the get, people are like, are they lying? What is this, fake maple? It's like, no, what you're smelling is actually fake maple. But you think that's the real maple.
Right, okay. Kind of tricks the senses a little bit.
It makes it complete, because
definitely
it's really not fair. And like cake is the same way. Like cake has got so much texture and there's so much more experience to it, but some of it has aroma and you want those flavors, but you can't just throw cake in there. It doesn't come through. You can throw cake in there, actually. That's fine. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't like make it taste like the cake necessarily.
Of course. Yeah, that makes sense. Totally. And so kind of moving forward a little bit, looking at your menu and researching you guys, you all are known for the Imperial Barrel-Aged Stouts.
Yes.
What inspired that? Was it a preference from you, or was it like a community thing?
Yeah, it was. That was something I was able to do very early, because there weren't a lot of breweries. There were 4 or 5, and there's a tiny distillery called Palm Ridge Reserve. Okay. I think the guy who owns it is Dick something, and he's known as Whiskey Dick.
Nice.
Which I always thought was like, really? Man, okay, buddy.
Yeah, right.
But I think I met him once, and I don't even know if they're still around. I haven't seen their stuff in forever, but they age their whiskey in little 5-gallon barrels.
Okay.
And little 5-gallon barrels are useless for a brewery at like Cigar City scale. It was stupid. But I was brewing 5-gallon batches, and so
seems kind of perfect.
The distributor for the whiskey would get the barrels, and then they were like selling them. I think they weren't very much money, but I could get like a bourbon barrel, or a whiskey barrel, and put stout in there. Okay, so that was the original Rare DOS. Was like I probably did 15 or 20 of those over there 6 months, and one of them was, so the guy who got the barrels was in like beer tasting groups around, and so it was like the Tampa group, and there's the South Florida group, and he took the keg. He paid me for the beer, gave me the barrel, and then I gave him the keg of barrel-aged stout.
Okay.
He took it to the South Florida group, where 5 gallons of beer to beer tasting is way too much.
Yeah, it's a lot, for sure.
So they decided to hand bottle the rest of the keg and send it to friends at other tasting groups, and that's how we got on the map.
Oh, awesome.
So they did. And after that, it was really, I enjoy the style. I've always thought it was a little bit too gate kept, just because it's dessert.
It is. It's very rich,
but people like dessert.
Totally.
Like the cookie aisle is a whole aisle.
It is indeed.
And then it's not even where the cakes are. That's another aisle. And then there's the bakery. People like desserts. Like it shouldn't be that big of a deal for somebody to get to try those. I don't think. And so I've always thought it was dumb that it was like super exclusive. But at the same time, that's where the money is. So
yeah, absolutely.
There's pros and cons, but it was something. I enjoyed it, and I've been one of my earlier jobs at Cigar City was like coming up with new, basically treatments, adjuncting Maduro or High Life kegs for various people, like Ryan at Angry Chair, the owner of Angry Chair. He was the manager of the original Brass Tap
Whoa.
And him and Joey are friends since at least back then.
Okay.
And they wanted a special keg for the last Wednesday of every month, just for the brass tap.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my job, was
Nice.
come up with a 5-gallon treatment of something. And we did, that was Cubano Espresso, so that was the coffee Maduro. I think we did vanilla. Oatmeal raisin cookie was mine.
Whoa.
That was like fall of 2009 was probably the first time that was ever made. And that was a 5-gallon keg at the brass tap. I think they actually just canned it last year.
Really?
Yeah, look at that. They still make that beer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But stuff like that was, but it was very experimental, and it was, nothing was off limits. And there, at the, you make a 15-barrel batch of Maduro is not very much on the scale of beer, but when you break it down into like how many pints and how many like a sixtel here and there, like it was, you could try anything, and the risk was so low.
Oh, that's
like,
pretty fantastic.
Whatever you wanted to do, and Wayne would have his ideas, and he would do stuff, and that was like the one place I got to be creative at Cigar City, was in that realm. Awesome. But then the pressure also builds, like, oh shit, it's next week, I don't have a beer made. What am I gonna make?
Yeah, right. So I kind of want to break down the Imperial Stouts, because we've never been able to talk to anybody who really like specializes in that. Yeah. What is an Imperial Stout? How is it made? What makes it Imperial? Because we see stouts a lot, but we rarely see the Imperials. What makes it Imperial?
Imperial Stout is just bigger stout, basically, and bigger means more sugar to start. So before fermentation, more sugar. Okay. And then you can really get into nitty-gritty details here. You can get into the difference between Imperial Stout in the U.S., Imperial Stout in Europe. Then there's extra or foreign export stout, which is like, you can find those Guinness bottles that are foreign export that are like 7+%, whereas regular Guinness is like 4.
Right.
So there's a lot of directions you can go, but it's stout. First off, is just basically black beer. You can say that, well, it has to be ale yeast versus lager yeast, because if it's lager yeast, then it's Baltic porter, or porters aren't stouts. And yes, technically, but when you have to really get into, like, sit somebody down with a chart and a book to explain the difference, is it really that big of, like...
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
The experience is not that different.
Yeah.
Technically, there are differences. So as a brewer, I'm aware of the differences. I've stopped caring about the differences. They aren't really relevant. But we do. So I would say the American styles, barley wine and stouts, got a reputation for basically just hopping the shit out of stuff. Okay. And not my thing. Great for IPAs, good for IPAs, but that's it. Like hoppy barley wines and stuff like that I've found like 3 in existence that I've ever enjoyed.
Oh, really?
Like, they're not for me. And stouts, like, what are you doing? Right. It's rich and sweet. We don't need a bunch of bitterness in there.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
So skipping that. So that's for me. Imperial, so like your regular stout isn't really... We'll use Guinness as the default just because it's everywhere. And that's probably what people think of first. That's an Irish dry stout, which is a specific thing. It's actually like 130 calories and 4% alcohol. Maybe it's even less than that. Maybe it's like 120 calories. It's practically light beer. Yeah. It's also not very much carbonated at all, if there is any carbonation.
No, it's not.
And so people think that it's like a loaf of bread, when really it's not at all, and in fact less filling because there's no bubbles. So you can chug those all day, and you won't like start burping a whole bunch.
Yeah, that's.
So yeah, I've never understood that personally from an experience standpoint. But yeah, so Guinness is very small. It's a very small beer, and starting sugar is probably under 12. Plato, that's our scale. So Plato is basically percent of the liquid that is sugar.
Okay.
For reference, maple syrup is like 55 to 65% sugar.
Gotcha.
And so that pours pretty thin, but it's definitely thicker than water.
Totally.
And then honey is like in the 90s.
Oh, Jesus.
And that's why honey lasts forever, is because it is so much sugar that it doesn't have enough water in it to sustain life. And so bacteria, all that stuff can't live. It just immediately, any water in the cells is just sucked out into the sugary honey.
Oh, okay. So what would one of your Imperial Stouts here be on the plate?
Our starting gravities are anywhere from 29 is definitely the low end now. It used to be like 25. Tastes from 15 years ago to now have definitely gone sweeter. More breweries have made sweeter beers. So now what we used to do at 25 will definitely like under 29 we'll keep boiling for sure.
Okay.
In general, we like to be over 30. 40, I've heard 46 is roughly the limit for fermentation. That's a story from a brewery in Richmond called The Vale that boiled for, I don't know, like 2 days or something stupid. So boiling, the process of boiling does a lot of things in brewing, but one of the main things it does when making bigger beers is drives off water.
Okay.
The sugar doesn't boil off, the water does.
Okay.
So the less water you have, the more sugar you have, the higher your concentration.
That makes total sense.
So that's what boiling for 2 days, they drove off a lot of water.
I can imagine.
They kept a lot of sugar, and they spent 2 weeks trying to get it to ferment, and it would not.
Oh,
so I was like, well, that's kind of the limit. We've done 44, we've done 44.6, and it does ferment, but how well? We'll never know. We couldn't measure it. There was so much sugar left that it was off the scale.
Oh my
so did we
God.
make very much alcohol? No. Was it incredibly sweet? It was like syrup. Like it was borderline maple syrup.
Yeah,
That's really, yeah. So that's stuff. But what you get with that, so imperial stouts, when you add more sugar, you have more potential for alcohol. So the more sugar, the more opportunity to make alcohol. That's how all alcohol pretty much is made.
Okay, understood.
Even like distilled spirits, they start with a sugar source of some kind, ferment it through the process of yeast eating the sugar to make alcohol, and then they run distillation. So that's why rum is sugar cane. There's your sugar source. Like I think brandy is grapes, wine. So then whiskey is basically beer.
Would agave be a sugar source?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Agave syrup.
Yeah, so like tequila that are
your sugar source.
Okay,
and so that will give you distinction in your distilled spirit. But a lot of the spirits we think of as different are actually not very different. Vodka, you can use anything. People think of potatoes because of the stories about potatoes. Not necessarily. Yes, you can use potatoes. It's starch. You can turn it into sugar.
Okay.
It's possible.
Right.
It is not the cheapest way to do it. Corn is probably your best bet. And so a lot of, like vodka doesn't, unless it specifies they use potatoes, they may not. They probably don't.
Okay.
So yeah, you just need grain is very common. One unusual one is milk.
Oh, wow.
You can actually, there is a process for breaking down lactose, which humans do not that well. Lactose intolerant people do very badly.
I can imagine so, yeah.
But lactose is very hard to digest, and yeast and human digestion are similar. It's not the same, but it is similar. So if you digest it well and it tastes sweet and delicious and makes energy for you, it probably ferments and you can make alcohol with it also. But lactose, believe it or not, there's at least several gins I know of that they start with milk and they end with gin. It's amazing. And it doesn't taste milky at all. It's not like weird like cheese gin or anything.
Yeah.
Once you distill it, it doesn't really taste like anything that it started with.
Wow.
Yeah, so sugar source, back to stouts.
Yeah.
Imperial stouts will have higher alcohol because you have more sugar. And fermentation, there's two factors. One is attenuation, so yeast is never going to be 100%. It's not going to eat every piece of sugar it can find and turn it into alcohol. So there's always a percentage that it will ferment. And on top of that, there's like a upper limit for different yeasts for how high the alcohol is that it can survive. And so a lot of that is like 12-ish% up to maybe 15%. And then there's specialized yeasts that you can get that'll go higher than that.
Okay.
But so once you hit that, though, the opportunity at 30-something Plato is for an obscene ABV, but the yeast won't survive, and percent attenuation isn't going to be that high. Even if you fermented 70%, you still have a lot of sugar left. So McDonald's sweet tea, I think we measured as 15 Plato.
Oh, wow.
So that's 15% sugar in that liquid. Yeah. Incredibly sweet tasting, and we've had many imperial stouts that will finish above that. So you're talking a lot of sugar left over.
Yeah, definitely.
So the sugar contributes to the alcohol, and barrel aging, alcohol stabilizes. So just the way alcohol wipes will, and hand sanitizer and stuff, the alcohol does kill bacteria. At beer levels, it's not nearly as effective as like isopropyl on your hands, hand sanitizer, but it does limit bacteria's growth.
Okay.
And then So it allows you to barrel age. So putting it in the barrels, it'll stay stable. It's got that alcohol.
And that's what the barrel aging's for, is to keep it stable.
The barrel aging adds a lot of flavors.
Okay.
So barrel aging, so whiskey, any spirit with color, barring the additive tequilas, they probably have other additive spirits where they just add color. The color comes from barrels, and so that goes in clear. It's vodka basically going into the barrels. There's differences, yes, but you could take vodka, put it in a barrel, and you would get the color of whiskey, you would get the flavors of whiskey. It may not be that good of a whiskey, but you could pretty much make whiskey. You could make, if it's 51% corn, you could make bourbon starting with vodka, putting it in the barrel.
Interesting.
And so all that color, the more time so the barrels are oak, and they light them on fire and char them. So the inside looks like charcoal.
Gotcha.
And that does a couple of things, but one thing, then they don't like clean it after that. They close it and put the spirit in there. So all that charcoal gives you a lot of color, and then sitting there over time, it'll develop a deeper and deeper color. Oh. And so that is what you get in the spirits. And in the beer, you want it, so the spirit's been pulled out, whatever, you can use barrels that are brandy, whiskey. We use mostly whiskey, mostly bourbon. But we've used probably 17 different types of barrels. There's all sorts of things you can use, but they're very stable because the spirit in there was 120, well, it was like 60-something% alcohol. Like that's flammable, that is sterile, like nothing can live in that. Right. So the barrel inside now has definitely had nothing living in it. And so when we put the beer in there, it should be clean, but it's wood. It's wooden staves. It's slightly porous. They leak sometimes. You put the bung in the top, and it's kind of airtight, but it's not really airtight. Right. But so you want a stable product. If you put like Miller Lite into a barrel, it's probably going to go bad. Okay. It might not. Yeah. You might be okay, but having something stable at like 12% alcohol, that goes a long ways. Gotcha. So that's one of the reasons it works so well in barrel aging. The other is so fake vanilla comes from oak. Oak has a ton of vanillins, the vanilla compounds in it. Yeah. And so if you go to the store, you'll see vanilla extract, and then you'll see vanilla flavoring. And the vanilla flavoring is from oak. They actually make it from oak. They don't even bother, because vanilla is very expensive. Right. Vanilla extract is from vanilla beans, very expensive to make. Better. But vanilla flavoring, all those vanillins, that's in oak. That's what the whiskey is picking up. Okay. That's what we get out of it with the beer. Yeah. And so you're getting, if you're getting you're starting with vanilla, but you can get spice, you can get cinnamon, all the subtleties of whiskey, you'll get those in the beer as well. So, we're starting to get into desserts again. Yeah. Pretty soon, something sugary, chocolatey, pair pretty well with that. So that's where barrel aging is, on its own is magic. I've always been fascinated by that. Frankly, our Imperial Stout is god-awful not in a barrel. Really? It's unpalatable. Oh my god. It's not, it's part of it is age. So the yeast, the dense sugar is what gives the liquid density and what we're talking about. So the denser the liquid, the more buoyant stuff is. Just like we float in the Dead Sea because of the salt content. The liquid's more dense. The yeast and other junk in the beer and something that has that much sugar left floats really well. Okay. And it will not, our lagers will drop clear because there's not much density left. They sink. But in Imperial Stouts, they'll stay buoyant. Okay. And they don't taste very good. And so part of the Imperial Stout for us, just waiting for all that stuff to finally drop out. If we did it in stainless steel and waited 6 months, I think it would probably taste way better. But nobody does that. So it's we'll have our Imperial Stout. If I'm going to wait 6 months and age it, I'll just put it in a bourbon barrel. Yeah. It's going to taste better, and it'll get the time that I'm going to have to give it anyway.
And what's a typical time for some of your stouts, or do they very much vary?
The barrel size matters, so if we need something quicker, the smaller the barrel, the faster the turn. Okay. That's why the Palm Ridge Reserve was aging in little barrels, or startup distilleries will have little barrels a lot of times, because you can age, I would say, 4 times faster at 5 gallons, and maybe 3 times faster at 15 gallons. And then there's 20-something, 25-gallon barrels that probably age twice as fast, I would guess. So where we would need a year plus for a 53-gallon barrel. That's
Right.
the standard bourbon barrel. The 5-gallon barrel, 3 months.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And 6 months for the 15-gallon barrels was great. And so that's kind of the only like shortcut to barrel-aged beer.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it varies. I'd say we haven't done anything under 2 years in a while now. But routinely, going back like 10 years ago, I would say 1 year was pretty nice. And Florida, the climate matters. Being here in Florida, like our barrels are stored in a warehouse with no temperature control of any kind. And so all summer long, that liquid is sitting there, and it's usually about 84, 85 degrees. And it's just sitting there in those barrels at that temperature night and day. It doesn't cool down at night. And it's hot and humid. The humidity keeps the barrels swollen. They don't leak. It's great. And they age pretty fast. Whereas if we were up north, the winters, I know like Hill Farmstead in Vermont, he tastes the beer and basically counts how many summers when it's warm that it needs to age. Whereas I'm like, it's just months, man. All the months are the same.
Yeah.
Like the range of temperatures, I think the coldest we've ever pulled it out of the barrel was 73. Just because, it's colder outside, but there's a lot of liquid in there. It takes a while for that to cool down.
Yeah.
And the heat mass, like that side of the warehouse will be warm in the winter just because there's so much mass that was still, it's taking forever to cool down. And then, our cold snaps last for 3 days anyway. So
that's very true. Yeah. We're in one right now. So now you said that you keep them in a warehouse. You don't have those in your brewery.
No, we have another brewery. It's a warehouse facility that is not open to the public. There's no tap room. We're not allowed to, we don't have a license to serve there. We're not even allowed to put a sign on the building in front of the landlord. So it's pretty nondescript, but we always had to have an auxiliary space. This space was what we could afford.
Understood.
This was BP settlement money. So thanks BP
BP.
Thanks Horizon for blowing up, I guess.
Seriously.
I don't know. But whatever BP money we had, that went into this, and we've always had to have, when we opened, Pegs was still going, so we still had the restaurant, so that's where we would get grain deliveries. That's where we would store kegs. There's no opportunity to do that down here.
Understood.
So it's like, and then we rented a warehouse right next to Green Bench, and then we rented another little warehouse, and we're gonna put a brewery in there, and then a competitor bought the building because he wanted to be our landlord, and we said, I don't think that's going to work out.
Yeah, right.
So we moved out of there to our current warehouse, which has been great. We've been there 10 years almost now.
Oh, nice.
And it's got a bigger brew house that's designed specifically to brew imperial stouts.
Cool.
So in order to get all that sugar, it takes a lot of grain. The mash process is ridiculous. So Cigar City, I learned a few techniques. So you'd fill the mash tun, the grain, basically as much grain as you can use without overflowing the vessel, and then we'd fill the kettle only halfway, drain out, mash in again, as much grain as we could. So it's basically like half at a time. And then eventually we decided to go to a third at a time, and it adds a lot of time. It's pretty wasteful in terms of the amount of sugar, what you're dumping down the drain when I'm brewing, say Presta. I'm checking to make sure there's still enough sugar running over to the kettle, and if there's not, I cut it off and just have to top with water.
Wow.
Whereas with Imperial Stout, what I'm sending down the drain is starting out probably is twice as high as where Presta starts. So it's the amount of sugar I'm sending down the drain and the amount of grain I've used. My efficiency is pathetic, but it's what it takes to make the beer. So.
Definitely, yeah. All right, so my last question for you is this. You guys have been here 20 years, you say now, the trend that the beer world is going, do you see an influx in today of people buying imperial stouts, or are you guys do you see yourselves trying to make more of IPAs, sours, or whatever selling? Where do you see the trend of beer going in the community, St. Pete specifically?
Away from beer, honestly. I have no idea where the trend is right now.
Really?
It's not in beer. You are. Let's look around. I would guess you're the youngest people here. Mm-hmm. There is not so the audience that drove the craft beer boom from, depending on your region, 05, 06 to 2018, maybe 2020. COVID was, I don't think really to blame, but it was a cliff in a way. That audience was, like me. I was 25 to 35 through that boom, and now I'm 43, and I've got kids. I've got whole other. My life has changed a lot, and I think the people that were 30 with going out to breweries and traveling to breweries didn't have kids. Now they have kids. Their lives are different, and that's a normal cycle. We saw it at the restaurant. You have customers you'll see a lot for 2-3 years even, and then you don't see them much anymore. But new customers will show up, and what drove craft beer was a time when, for whatever reason, there was an audience that was the right age with the money to spend and the interest in it to drive that business, but now they're aging out. I had a customer come in, being on the bar, and since I've been bartending since March, it's been fascinating because I'll occasionally see somebody that was, diehard fan, and I'm just like, oh my god, I forgot this guy existed.
Yeah,
because they're not here anymore. And talk with them like, well, they're doing this now, and my kids are finishing school or just started college, so now I get out a little bit more. But it's like, yeah, your life's totally different now.
It is, yeah.
But then what we haven't seen is anybody under 30.
Wow.
Even seeing people, and there's the enthusiasm from that audience isn't in the beer necessarily.
Where do you think it is?
It's in other things that are going on at breweries.
The event space?
The event space is big. Event space is big not for a demographic. It's just a big thing.
Right.
People like to have parties and weddings, and you can, if you have a music venue as part of your facility, then, you have concerts and people show up for those things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But what you don't get, and I would say what's shocking to me, having been, we were very well known, and we still have an audience internationally. But I would say 80+% of the people who come in here have no idea. They're like, oh, we have people that come in that don't even know that we make beer. I'm like, oh, do you carry this or that? Oh, who makes this? Like, we do, right there. Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That's it. And it's just like, wow, it is not the same. When we opened, everyone who came here knew exactly what we did, knew exactly what we were about. They came here for the beer. They came here. If that tap listing was on 10 years ago, this place would be packed.
Really?
We would be absolutely, that tap list would have been destroyed in a weekend.
That's insane.
And now it is like, it's kind of fun. You get people in and they have no idea. They're like, oh, do you have any stouts? And you can tell like right away, like they're thinking Guinness. And I'm like, okay, we have a whole tap list of barrel-aged stouts, and I'm going to give you some samples.
Yeah.
Oh my God, what's this? And some people are into it and some people are definitely not.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, but it's helping people, find their way through. But it's not, there's enough, the mediocrity that spawned out of the brewery boom has lowered expectations for consumers across the board, myself included. I found myself traveling back home to Iowa, and went out to eat, and there was a bunch of craft beers on the menu.
Yeah.
And I didn't know most of the breweries. I'm like, I'll try this one. And as I'm ordering it, I'm thinking, please just don't be terrible. Like, please be drinkable. Like, fingers crossed.
Yeah, right.
And I'm looking at that menu, and I'm like, damn. Like, my expectation is so low. And it's because there is so much mediocre beer out there. And I'm not mad at, mediocre beer for ruining it, or it's not really about the blame. It's just, this is what an unseen consequence that I didn't expect was, if there is so much of it, like, I wouldn't travel for beer either. After one trip going to a place where every brewery was mediocre, or almost every brewery was mediocre, or some downright bad, like, what am I doing with my time?
Mm-hmm.
This seems like a dumb hobby.
Yeah.
And so, I'm like, I get it, but I didn't, like, people always like, oh, you must hate that brewery because their beer sucks. I'm like, no, I don't. Like, they're very nice people, and they know their beer's not very good, and they're having a good time, and whatever,
Yeah.
each their own. But this is like the consequence of having so much mediocrity in the market that I'm right with those consumers. Like, my expectation going into a brewery I don't know is really bad. It is so low, and I'm crossing my fingers like, please, just
Definitely.
clean beer. Just be clean and boring.
Absolutely.
Like, if it's more than that, I'll be so impressed. So what the trend is, I don't know. I think we've got a long ways to go down yet. There's so few brewery closings, so it's not like there's been some fundamental shift or anything. I would love to see more young people, not kids obviously, but just like, where is the 29-year-old who's looking into like better beer or more interesting beer, or like, and it's not even about being better, like fucking a green tangerine sour, a 3-year barrel-aged barley wine, like, those aren't flavors you get on the shelf.
No, definitely not.
So, but it's, people aren't looking for it either. So it doesn't make waves. So I'm fairly pessimistic, but I'm not. I mean, I don't know. Craft beer has been in decline for almost 5 years, as far as I would say, from my experience. And I'm several stages into mourning, so I'm way beyond anybody who's like, "Oh man, you're so negative. It's so sad." I'm like, I'm not. Like, that was 4 years ago. I was sad. Like, now I've made my peace with that, and it's I'm interested to see what is next. I don't know. I wish I did. Yeah. I don't think it's spirits. I think spirits are. I mean, I really do enjoy cocktails, and a really good bartender making great cocktails is awesome. It's fun, but at the same time, like, they're fucking expensive.
They are.
And I don't know who's got money to spend right now, but it's not the people I know. And then I don't think. I mean, wine is stayed. I think seltzers definitely peaked. I don't think seltzers are just going to disappear, but It's like, oh, we'll start making seltzers now. That'll make money. Like,
and I think that's over. When you're talking about the mediocrity of beer, it kind of goes into seltzers now too, where everybody has them, and now they're all pretty mid. And now it's just like, well, hope it's good,
Yeah, fingers crossed. Yeah, it's so disappointing. So I'm pretty cognizant of customers when they come here. Like, I hope my bar staff's doing a good job, but it's like, when I'm on the bar, like, if somebody doesn't like what they're having, like, we're gonna keep trying.
Yeah, right.
And I will run through the whole tap list. I've done it a few times. Like, you'll try every damn beer on the list.
Yeah.
If you don't like any of them, that's okay.
Yeah, but at least you got them, right?
I'm trying.
Yeah,
I would try, and I'm not gonna take a penny for beers that you don't like. Like, not a chance. That's not what this is about.
Absolutely.
I would love to. Like, I feel like we have a wide enough range that there's got to be something you enjoy. But man, if all you drink is Hefeweizen, I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't have it. If you want a nitro stout, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. Well, Doug, we appreciate your time so much, and thank you for doing this. And
I'm glad you guys are doing this.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's been really fun being able to go to all the breweries and seeing everything.
Absolutely.
Interviewing people like you who have really put their life into this and perfected the craft. So we appreciate you a lot.
Yeah, that's been, whenever I'm out of beer, it won't be because I don't know how to make beer anymore. I'm confident that I do know how to make a good beer. But
absolutely, you absolutely do.
We've had a couple does that a business make? I don't know.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers.